IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. That's Shaun Davis. I'm Brian Driscoll, and we got to get right into it, Shaun, because it was a very busy weekend for Notre Dame. Normally this time of year, normally once spring practice is over, the weekends are kind of calm and quiet. But this weekend, very busy because Notre Dame had 6 players taken in the 2025 NFL Draft. They also had a big commitment this weekend, and so that's what our focus is going to be on today. Shaun and I are going to break down first and foremost at the beginning. We're going to dive into the commitment of Ayden Pouncey, who committed to Notre Dame this weekend. We were not surprised by his commitment. We knew that was going to happen. That had already happened silently. But the timing of it was obviously a lot quicker than we expected. So we're going to break that down. And then, of course, we're going to talk about the NFL Draft. And we're going to look at the NFL Draft from 2 different aspects. We're going to first look at it from the standpoint of just kind of looking at the 6 players that were drafted and just kind of sharing our thoughts. I know Shaun's got some pretty intense views on where Xavier Watts got drafted. We're on the same page on that one. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about, the fits and things like that. Spend just a little bit of time just kind of recapping the draft and, maybe sharing some other observations and thoughts about the 2025 NFL Draft. But then we're going to have some fun and kind of look at the 26 NFL Draft. And in between those 2 conversations, we're going to have or those 2 topics, we're going to have a conversation about. I've had a lot of people reach out to me and say, hey, they're concerned. Why did Notre Dame only have 6 guys drafted? Ohio State had 14, Georgia had 13. And apparently there's some people in the media talking about it. I don't know, but I can just tell you what I'm told. And so I was like, well, let's discuss it. I wrote an article about it today at Irish Breakdown, but we're going to discuss it as well as why is Notre Dame only having 6 players a sign that they're still not there yet? Or does it say something else? And Shaun and I think we're on the same page on this, Shaun. We believe it's something else, and we'll get into that here during that show. And then, of course, we'll kind of take a glimpse, an early look at the 2026 NFL Draft and Notre Dame's potential prospects in it, because I have a feeling the next 2 to 3 drafts are going to be a lot more busy than this past weekend's draft was for Notre Dame, especially on days 1 and 2. So, but before we begin, my friend, Shaun Davis, how are you today? You ready to rock and roll?
Yo, I'm absolutely ready to rock and roll. It was a busy spring covering recruiting, blue and gold game, practices. And then my birthday anniversary was this past week. So I just took some time off and just really enjoyed spending time with the missus. So I'm happy to be back locked in on Irish Breakdown and Notre Dame football. Can't wait to talk.
And I'm so glad that we finally got a chance to have Tiff and Angela meet. And they also met Trevor's wife. So after the blue gold game, the 3 of us are as the 3 couples were able to get out to dinner. So that was good to see as well. So I know they've both heard about each other, but have never met yet. So
yeah,
that was always a pleasure as well. So Shaun, we're going to kick things off obviously on Saturday, kind of in the middle of the draft. I got a heads up that they were going to get a commitment from, a player that we knew to be committed to them silently was going to go public a little sooner than expected. That was Ayden Pouncey, a 6'3", 175-pound cornerback from the state of Florida. He plays at Winter Park High School. If this name sounds a little familiar to you, it should, because he's the younger brother of 2020 cornerback Ayden Pouncey, who Notre Dame recruited, and also the younger brother of Jordan Pouncey, who was a wide receiver that was committed to Notre Dame as part of the 2017 class. Jordan ended up decommitting after Mike Denbrock was let go. And obviously Notre Dame went through that 4-8 season, went to Texas, ended up at Florida. Jordan has actually been with Ayden on both of his visits to Notre Dame, which I found, or Ayden, excuse me, which I thought was very interesting, and we'll have a little bit about that. But this is a very talented cornerback, Shaun, consensus 4-star recruit, grades out as a 4-star player on my board, on the Irish Breakdown board. He is listed. I've seen some people. I want to make sure we're clear on this, Shaun. A lot of people keep saying safety, 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 safety. And maybe he ends up playing safety. But 2 things. Number 1, he plays cornerback in high school, also plays receiver and returns kicks. And 2, Notre Dame is absolutely recruiting him to play corner. Anyone can move somewhere else. Notre Dame, 2 of the last 3 defensive backs drafted by Notre Dame began their careers at wide receiver in Cam Hart and Xavier Watts, but they are recruiting him to play cornerback. Notre Dame sees a cornerback, and when we rank him and we grade him and we evaluate him, we do so as a corner as well. And so now we'll talk about that versatility a little bit, but that's something that we needed to clear up, Shaun, before we get started. Is this is a guy that when Mike Mickens sees him, he does not see a safety that will give a shot to play corner, and then eventually they see a kid that they're recruiting with the thought this kid is going to play cornerback for us. And I think with the track record that Mike Mickens has with Sauce Gardner and Cam Hart and Leonard Moore, and even going back to Bowling Green, Nick Johnson was a 6'1", 6'2" kid who was a freshman or an all conference player as a true freshman at Bowling Green under Mike Mickens. I think the track record for Mike Mickens says, hey, if he thinks this kid at 6'3" can play cornerback, we should probably at least maybe think that there's something there.
Yeah, and I love the identification. We'll get to the film breakdown and watch that and talk about what we like and things that he's probably going to have to lock in to play at the next level or play at Notre Dame, whether or not it's going to be at the field or whether or not it's going to be at the boundary. But most of all, the profile of this kid, the length, 6'3", you're going to see when you watch the film why Mike Mickens likes this particular player. And anytime Mike Mickens loves a player, you pretty much give him the benefit of the doubt, regardless of what your thoughts might be. You said he's a 4-star, the way you rank him. And so I see the same type of talent. Now, it's going to be up to him. And of course, Mike Mickens, once he gets on campus, where is his ceiling going to be? And that's going to be interesting to talk about as we watch his film. But to hear, we're going to background, we're going to that.
We can go into that now, Shaun, if you want to transition into that. Go ahead.
I remember talking to him right after he got his offer officially. And he's like, I've been talking to Coach Freeman and Coach Mickens for months, and I've been waiting for the offer. Like, this is the offer I've been waiting for. So that just tells you how much, communication equity had been built up by Marcus Freeman and the rest of the staff with this young man. And then the connection, you talk about his brother's connection with Mike Denbrock, his family's familiarity with Notre Dame, what it has to offer in totality. Like, that kind of cuts the minutia, right? Now that's already understood. Now we can really build the relationship, talk about how you fit, talk about how we see you. Like you said, there are other people, other programs that might be recruiting him at the safety position. I think it was very clear early on where he stood with Notre Dame, where he stood with Coach Freeman, and where he stood with Mike Mickens, and he ultimately ends up committing to the class.
Now, for looking into the backstory, Shaun, the recruitment was an interesting one because Notre Dame did offer a little bit later. There's reasons why. I mean, especially with the background, you got to make sure that this is going to make sense for you. And when they started this recruitment, there were several schools that were ranked that were just in a better position for Notre Dame. And what's interesting is even this weekend, I reached out to a buddy of mine down in Florida and kind of got his thoughts on, where he saw this, because I wanted to see if he had heard kind of what we knew to be true, which is that this young man had committed to Notre Dame. And then I eventually let him know, hey, I let him know kind of what was going to happen. He's someone who I know. I wanted him to be prepared. He's hooked me up with some info in the past. So I wanted to do right by him. And he was like, wow, that's surprising. And because as of last week, Miami and Florida still both thought they were going to get him. So obviously he hadn't quite yet told those coaches what was going on. And then by the time my buddy hadn't talked to them since then. But that's kind of where this one was trending for a long time, or at least the perception was, Shaun, including from me. I felt that way as well. That this is one where he might be tough to get out of Florida, especially when you look at kind of the fact that Notre Dame had tried unsuccessfully to sign both of his brothers. And then, of course, the Florida schools were pushing hard for him as well. Also had an official visit set up to LSU already slated. He was going to make a trip to LSU, and he also had offers from Georgia. He had an offer from Florida State. He had offers from Michigan, Penn State, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, Nebraska, South Carolina, and a long list of schools. This is a kid with a very, very impressive offer list. And things started to move a little bit on his first visit. Notre Dame kind of put themselves in the mix, and we talked about that on the message board going into that visit. Like, this visit's going to be huge because it's the first time he'd been to campus as a recruit. I believe he'd been to campus before as a child with his brothers. Because if you think about it, when Jordan committed, he'd have been not even 10. Ayden wouldn't have even been 10 because that was back in 2016. That was 9 years ago. So unless he's 18 already, which he isn't, or 19, he would have been less than 10. And then even 5 years ago when they were recruiting Ethan, he would have been, 12, 11, 12 or so. So this is the first time he'd been on campus as a recruit, as him being recruited. And Notre Dame did very well. They put themselves in the mix. That was the big thing, is they had put themselves in the mix. And the key was always going to be the follow-through. What happens next? Well, Mike Mickens did Mike Mickens things over the next couple weeks, and then they got Ayden Pouncey to come back in late April. And when we saw that, when I was told that, Shaun, we both kind of had a, that's interesting. He's coming to Notre Dame right before the quiet period starts for a second visit in a month. We're like, all right. And what we said at the time was like, look, the perception is that the Southern schools are still the schools to beat. But this is a huge opportunity for Notre Dame. Now, what we thought was going to happen is Notre Dame was going to knock it out of the park again, and then they'd be the team to beat going into officials. Because, again, this is a young man that had already scheduled official visits for June with LSU and with Miami, I know for a fact, and I believe he had one either set or was working on setting one up for Florida as well. Coming out of the visit, I got a call that night. It's done. I'm like, excuse me, what do you mean it's done? So then I make another call, and I'm like, I get a call back, and I'm like, yep, it's done deal. He committed, but he's probably not going to go public till mid-May. So, we said we put out what we put out, which is Notre Dame did a great job. We really like where this one is going. And, of course, all the crystal balls start going out, and I think that was ultimately kind of what my opinion – this is my opinion. This part isn't intel. My opinion is that's kind of was like, look, they're already all saying it. Might as well just kind of get it over with and then help recruit this class. And that's what happened. And so Ayden Pouncey made the decision he was going to commit on Saturday. And so he committed. He's in the class. He's fired up about being in the class. And – I think at the end of the day, Shaun, there were two things that really factored into this for Notre Dame. Number one, obviously Mike Mickens' track record with DBs and the relationships and all that type of thing. The second thing is there's a reason why both Pouncey, the older Pouncey brothers, had interest in Notre Dame. Mom's a teacher. Academics are very important to them. It just, the fit wasn't right for Notre Dame for multiple reasons. If Mike Denbrock doesn't get let go, Jordan Pouncey's coming to Notre Dame. I mean, the older brothers come to Notre Dame if that doesn't happen. If they don't have that 4-8 debacle and the coaching turnover and all that stuff, they would have maybe got two of the three. But the fact is that mom is very much into the academic side of things. All three of these young men are very strong students as well as student athletes. And so she's always been sold on Notre Dame. But the difference now is there's now a more proven track record of success with these type of players. And that played a huge difference in why they were able to make this one happen compared to the last one and some of the other young men like him, is because you can now look back and say, you want to come here and play for championships? Check. You're someone who cares about the academic piece? Check. Oh, you want to play in the NFL and you want to be a high draft pick? Check. And that's what he's been able to do. Mike Mickens and Marcus Stream have been able to do. And it's just such a different dynamic now. You want to talk about how last season is impacting recruiting? This is another example. Now, he always would have been interested in Notre Dame, but without that track record of success for the NFL and without them playing for a championship, is he in the class right now? I don't know that for sure, but I have my doubts. And so this is another example of how what they did on the field this year is the same. And this keeps getting asked on. Ivan Taylor went to West Orange in Winter Garden. Ayden Pouncey's from Winter Park. I get the confusion, and also they both have orange in their uniform, so I totally get the confusion. But just want to point that out. He is not from the same high school as Ivan Taylor. But when you look at it, Shaun, this is just was a great job by the Notre Dame coaching staff to get this one done, get it done this early. But you are seeing the fruits of what you and I have been saying all along. Give them a reason to come, and they will come. And that's what we're seeing with players like Ayden Pouncey.
Another kid from South Florida, or from the state of Florida, which Notre Dame struggled, right? They got a commitment from Ivan Taylor last year, and then eventually decides to commit and go to another program. But ultimately, I think everything kind of adds to or contributes to this commitment from Ayden Pouncey, right? The winning on the field. Yeah.
Second year in a row, though, that they've got a corner from Florida that you and I rank as top 100 caliber player, because obviously last year Dallas Golden.
Right.
So to follow that up is big. Third commitment in this class from Florida to go with Noah Grubbs and Dylan
Faison. So you start to understand that they are making inroads in a place that was pretty much, without going back to the former, it's just kind of untapped, honestly, from the program, and especially at the skill position areas. So I think you're starting to see this program really get a clamp or set up root in certain areas that are going to yield a lot of fruit in the years to come. I think that's what you're really starting to see from a recruiting standpoint, a tree that is really still growing and has yet to fully mature, but you're starting to get that first fruit from it, and it's really sweet. And I think that it's only going to get even sweeter as we go out through the 26th class and finish this out, and further classes moving forward. But this is for me. I can't wait to get to the film, because I know people wonder about. I saw a great conversation, measurables as far as guys to the NFL. Normally, the average height, what it is not a lot of guys that fit his measurables to play the position of defensive back. But, I think you watch the film, you see the ability. And once again, we could throw analytics out, we could throw measurables out. We'll get to this when we get to the draft. The eyes, nothing is better than having the eyes to be able to see what others can't see. The tape doesn't lie.
Here's the reality, though, Shaun. When you talk about there aren't a lot of corners that are that tall, the numbers are low. Well, here's why this kind of recruitment helps Notre Dame, because two of the taller starting cornerbacks in the NFL are Mike Mickens' products. Sauce Gardner, who he recruited and then obviously coached to be a freshman All-American at Cincinnati. And then, of course, with what he did with Cam Hart. And so, people can say, hey, look, we want you to play corner, want you to play corner, want you to play corner. And then you look in the cornerback room and you're like, there's nobody in here that looks like me. Like all your corner, like your tallest guy is like 6'1". None of these guys look like me. So you're telling me that I'm going to play cornerback, but I see all your 6'2" plus guys over there in the safety room. So yeah, you're telling me that, but is this really how it's going to be for me? Where when he walks into the Notre Dame cornerback room, he's not looking down at Leonard Moore. He's slightly taller than Leonard Moore. And even like a guy like Christian Gray, Christian Gray is Notre Dame's shortest cornerback on the depth chart right now at 6 feet tall. Carson Hobbs is 6'1", and Creed Thomas is 6'1". And so when you look at that track record, when Notre Dame tells you you can play corner for us, then there's a track record to say, okay, this guy thinks I can play corner, and he knows how to develop people like me at corner. That's what Joey O'Brien can feel as a defensive back. That's what Ayden Pouncey can feel. That's what impacted with Jadon Blair. He can look and say, well, look what Notre Dame did with Kyle Hamilton. So and then he visits and he sees Luke Talich, and he's like, okay, they're not afraid to have tall safety. So yeah, somebody like me can fit in there much better. And that track record is huge. It goes back to the story I told back in the day about Alizé Mack. And one of the things I can't remember if he told me or somebody I was working with, but I remember in a story I wrote, he basically said, when I went to UCLA, they got on the board and they drew up all the different things how they were going to use me in their offense. But we didn't really watch film. When I went to Notre Dame, they just popped in tape of Tyler Eifert and showed me this is how we're going to use you. And so those are things that you look at and say the fact that they know that and they can show that is huge for Notre Dame. And so that was a big factor in why this decision was ultimately made. And I think the relationships part that you talked about is a big reason why it happened so quickly.
Yeah. And I think for him, the visit, I think there was always interest. I think he came up for the Florida State game, if I'm not mistaken. I think we were
I have to go
conversing.
back and look.
I
I
think
don't
it was
know
the
that he
Florida
made
State.
it.
It was either yes, it was the Florida State game because his original plan was to come up for the Louisville game,
Okay.
and then he ended up coming up for the Florida State game. And so coming off of that Florida State game, like you said, the buzz was he's going to stay in state, Miami, Florida, because at that point in time, Florida was kind of picking up steam because of the way they ended the season, and their recruiting class in 26 was really starting to pick up steam. And so that's why people felt the way they felt about his recruitment. But Notre Dame stayed at it. And like you said, that conversation that they had laid and the communication that had been laid by Marcus Freeman and Mike Mickens stayed with him. And as I said before, when you have family, normally Notre Dame is going to do a great job with family. The mother having a background in education, that sets the stage for an understanding and a conversation to go on with Ayden and his brothers. Like you said, he would have been committed if certain things and certain dominoes had not fallen.
Right.
So there's already an affinity within the family for Notre Dame to be able to counter what we know still exists today in negative recruiting when it comes to Notre Dame. And it's even worse now because they can't say you can't win anymore. They can't say, well, you're not going to get to a national championship. Notre Dame just did it. So now what else do they go to? And so having that type of connection within the family helped to counteract, helped to answer some questions. And then it kind of helped Notre Dame because there's certain things that they really didn't have. They could lay it on the table, but they didn't have to push it because they have the family pushing it.
Right.
When he goes back home from a visit or he gets off a phone call or off a text thread, the family is pushing that side for Notre Dame or helping Notre Dame in that aspect. So there are a lot of things I think that led to this that worked in Notre Dame's favor. And go ahead, because I know
one more thing about that, because you kept talking about, we'll do class impact next and then do film. But one quick thing, one of the dynamics I was very interested to see how it was going to play out was the fact that Jordan came with him on all of his visits. And you're like, okay, this could be really good or really bad for Notre Dame. And from what I understand, Jordan was very supportive of the push from Notre Dame and very supportive of his brother going to Notre Dame. There was no, well, this is why I decommitted. I mean, this was my journey, and I'm here to help you with your journey. I did my thing. And there, from what I understand, I don't want to say like Jordan Pouncey has any regrets or anything like that. I'm not saying that, but what I mean is he didn't decommit from Notre Dame because there was any sort of negative feelings about the institution or about it. There was nothing wrong. The guy that was recruiting him, the guy that he wanted to play for, got let go by a coach who's not here anymore. A lot of things that he liked about Notre Dame, his brother obviously likes, but the football situation is way different. And I think those things really are huge factors into why this deal was able to get done. Let's talk about the class impact too, Shaun. Obviously, with the success that Notre Dame's had in the secondary last couple of years, they went into this cycle looking at things a little bit different. They're going to take numbers because every coach is at the point now where it's like, look, I'm just going to load up till you tell me stop taking kids. I mean, that's kind of the strategy. Like, I talk to a lot of coaches now, and it's like in the past, like, well, we're looking to take 2 or 3. Now it's like, look, I'm going to keep recruiting until they tell me stop recruiting. I love that mentality. I really do. I mean, there's something to that, but at the same time, it's like, there's also some strategy involved. But, talking to people, around a program about what you're looking for in this class, the last 2 years, numbers were a huge need, Shaun, huge need. Because when you looked at, obviously, safety recruiting had been an issue for years, very inconsistent numbers wise. They were just really light on corners. When you kind of looked at, just kind of where Notre Dame was numbers wise, they had some big misses at corner. I mean, if it wasn't for the fact that they had a couple defensive backs move over to the secondary, Notre Dame's secondary the last couple of years would have been in much tougher shape than it was. And then you come out in your 2023 class, you get Christian Gray and Micah Bell at corner. Micah Bell doesn't stick. You get a Don Schuler, you get Ben Minnick, and you also then go out and get Luke Talich, who was not considered a scholarship recruit, but was always recruited like a scholarship player. And the plan was always he was going to get one super early. And now, as you see, Luke Talich is in the mix to start for Notre Dame. That helped sort of put some ointment on the wound a little bit, right? Then last year Notre Dame comes out, they get 3 corners, they get 3 safeties, and the talent was increased. I mean, you got Dallas Golden, who graded out as a top 50 player for me. You got Mark Zachary as a top 100 recruit. Cree Thomas, who we had as a 4-star top 150 recruit. You got Jadon Blair, who graded out as a top 50 recruit. You got Brandon Logan, who graded out as a top 250 recruit. And then Ethan Long, who was my lowest graded defensive back, but he was a kid that had a high ceiling. He just, he's got some work that's got to get done. But 3 corners, 3 safeties. You had 2 kids in the class that have the tools to play nickel, which, in my opinion, primarily Dallas Golden and Brandon Logan both have potential to be nickels as well, like starting nickels as well. So because of the fact that you landed 6 safeties, and then the 24 class, kind of the in-between class, you obviously got Leonard Moore and Carson Hobbs at cornerback. You got Tabron Benny Powell. You got Bronte Johnson. You got, I'm missing somebody at safety, Kennedy Urlacher, who's now gone because the numbers are so deep. I forgot about that class. But you're talking about like you've now fixed your numbers problem. So what was the focus coming into this class? Talent. It's not so much numbers, it's talent. We're looking for high upside talent. Got to commit from Chaz Smith at cornerback. You're now get a guy like Ayden Pouncey. So Notre Dame was looking for high upside players at corner and safety. Getting a player like Ayden Pouncey certainly gives you that. And then also, let's be honest, I mean, Mike Mickens is looking for a type. Chaz Smith is listed at 6'2". Ayden Pouncey is listed at 6'3". There's some other pure corners that they're still recruiting. I don't think that this necessarily means Notre Dame is done recruiting cornerback, just because, again, you got to think about it. As I've said before, Mike Mickens would like to ideally have that nickel spot be a corner, not a safety. And that's why they went out and recruited Devontae Smith this year instead of, Jordan Clark and Thomas Harper, who are more safety types. And then, of course, you see Dallas Golden getting a shot at nickel. You see Carson Hobbs getting a shot at nickel this spring. So, and then you look at a guy like Kerry Adams, whose Notre Dame is also recruiting. He's 6'1", so he's a guy that they're still pushing for. Joey O'Brien is a hybrid guy, can play safety, can play corner. They might even give a shot to play some receiver as well as a two-way player. But all of the kids that we're talking about they've been pushing so hard for are high upside guys, to the point where a couple guys that we really, and I don't want to say their names because they're not completely backing off on, but a couple guys that I know you and I like on film, they're not really pushing as hard for right now because they're zeroing in on some higher upside players. So when you recruit numbers and you rebuild your depth chart, Shaun, that allows you to go on the road and not have to worry about numbers. I can worry about talent. And that's also allowed them, because the corner board has not been very big. And I've had people say, like, dude, if you miss out on this guy and this guy, you're in trouble. And I'm like, I get that, but just be patient, let it play out. Like, they know that. But when you have a smaller board, you can now devote more attention to the players on that board. And that's what Mike Mickens was able to do. And not only getting Chasten Smith, but getting him to stay in the class, because the teams are still trying to flip him. And then also, of course, be able to go down and dip into Florida for Ayden Pouncey. So you've gone down into Florida. You beat Miami, and you beat Florida, and you beat Florida State for a kid they all wanted. That's that hasn't happened a whole lot at Notre Dame for that position over the years, Shaun.
And while answering all of those questions that you talked about as far as numbers, let's not get it twisted. It's been proven that Mike Mickens is still going out finding good talent and elite talent while being able to fill all of those other needs as well. So now you streamline it and funnel it a little more for him, and he can just focus on, I'm just going after talent. He's been doing that. So now he can give more focus to those top end kids that you talked about. And now the guys that they're in on, right? Kerry Adams, Jazeel Hart, Joey O'Brien, those type of guys. Well, yourself, from an evaluation standpoint, not his evaluation, just from our evaluation standpoint, we might have preferences, but we really don't care. Give us a combination of all of those guys that are left over, right? And that's a darn good class. That's a really elite level class from a talent perspective, regardless of measurables. Because like you said, you can go to lengthy guys like a Kerry Adams and a Joey O'Brien, Ayden Pouncey, and then you go all the way down to guys that probably fit the measurables of what you want at a nickel in college football, like a Jazeel Hart. And that's what you have. You just have a mixture of elite guys with elite talent, no matter what the measurables are. And that's a great position to have. I think the impact of the class, when you talk about putting him with Chasten, Smith already, is that, now I think he starts to look at his board. Speaking of Mike Mickens and Marcus Freeman, they start to look at the board. And now they can have a conversation with, we have this. How would we prefer this play out? We know what we have left on the board. We have official visits coming up. How would we like for this to play out? And now, how are we going to customize communication, visits, and official visits to make sure that we optimize and get what we ultimately want? That's not something that they're going to share outside of their personal conversations. But I think having Pouncey and Smith going into the silent period as they prepare for the official visit period, that puts them in a great position to really be able to go out and close out this class with talent that, honestly, they're going to be closing out with people that are probably ranked higher than the two young men that they have in the class already. And we're talking about 4-star level with a higher ceiling type talent coming into the class that's already committed. So that's a great position. And the class impact, when you look at it and you start to see all of the other people that are uncommitted, committed players are retweeting about Ayden Pouncey's commitment, but also uncommitted players are saying, hey.
Yeah, and I'm going to add more to that. That's a great point. I want to add more to that in the what's next section because I have some thoughts on that as well. Last thing on the class impact too, Shaun, is I do think Ayden Pouncey has field and boundary skills. I think Notre Dame would like to have more guys that can play both, like Leonard Moore, like Christian Gray. I mean, that's the reality is and Benjamin Morrison could as well. If Benjamin Morrison needed to play to the field, he could have played to the field. He's just better as a boundary guy. They want to have more guys that aren't just field guys or just boundary guys. If you can play in the boundary, you probably can play to the field, but not everybody that can play the field can't play to the boundary for different reasons. But I do believe Ayden Pouncey is a guy that can play both. And the reality is that talking about the potential of him playing safety or nickel is not out of the question either. And so let's be real about that. Notre Dame's recruiting him as a corner. They like him at corner. But if in 2-3 years they're sitting there saying, dude, you're our third or fourth corner, you could go be a number 1 at safety or number 2 at safety. Like let's say they lose Bronte and Jadon Blair to the NFL draft like really early. They're standouts, whatever. Or there's some other type of issue. And they're like, look, you can go start there or be a backup here. They're going to then move them and give them a chance to start somewhere else. But you can't do that if you can't play that position. Like some guys are just like, well, yeah, I mean, you're a backup at corner, and that's your life because you can't play something else. I think Ayden Pouncey, in theory, could play all 5 spots in the Notre Dame defense. And I felt that about Dallas Golden last year. I think there's positions I like him better at. I don't love him in nickel based on what Notre Dame has done, but we have seen guys like him thrive in that role, especially as kind of like rover hybrids. If they're going to play more zone, I could see them using him more in that nickel slot as a zone. I mean, think about him playing like taking on the hook curl zones and playing the flats, and things like that. And so, running up the seam in cover 3 or things like that. And also playing that hook curl zone in cover 2, different things like that, Shaun, where it's like, dude, you get a guy that long playing that in more zone looks, he can do that. But as a man guy, I really like him outside. I think he can play safety. I'm not going to sit there and pretend like I don't like some of the tools to translate to safety. But me saying that doesn't mean I don't think he can play corner, because here's the reality of it. If you can't run well enough to play corner, you're going to have a tough time playing safety in an elite level in this defense for what Notre Dame tries to do is in certain spots. So now some guys just don't have the body types or whatever to play. Like Adon Schuler's not playing cornerback at Notre Dame, but Adon Schuler didn't play at Notre Dame, didn't play safety because he's too slow to play corner. He just is not he doesn't have a corner game. And that's the thing that I like about this pickup is you are adding a young man that can play everywhere. Like Chaz Smith is a corner. Like he could play, I think, field and boundary and maybe could even play some slot. He's going to have to get stronger to play slot, but there's some things I like. But he's a corner, like corner. This is a young man that is a corner with the ability to play other positions at a high level. And when you can add a kid like that, a chess piece like that to your class, Shaun, it's huge. It's what we talked about with Dallas Golden last year. Well, you got Mark Zachary, you got Cree Thomas. Okay, well, where does Dallas Golden play? Wherever the heck you want to play him. I mean, he might be the recruit that has more potential to play more positions than anyone that Notre Dame has ever recruited in my adult life, in that he can not only play all 5 DB positions, you could move him to running back and he could play running back for you, and you could move him to receiver and he could play a receiver for you. And by the way, it's a pretty darn good flip and return man in high school as well. Well, Ayden Pouncey brings you some of that on defense. And look, if you ever got into a really bad spot and you were just like, dude, we don't have anybody who can play receiver. This kid can go over and play receiver because he's a pretty good wide receiver and a pretty good returner in high school, which you guys will see in the film. So, you know me, Shaun, I love kids like that. That's one of my biases. I tend to give guys like that a bigger boost than I give guys that can just kind of play one spot. I'll admit it. So if you can do multiple things as a prospect, I'm going to bump you up. That's one of the reasons that I told people Xavier Watts was a top 100 player coming out of high school. It's like, look, I think this kid can start for you and be a standout at multiple positions. I liked him a receiver. Notre Dame staff didn't want to play him there. He eventually moves over to safety, and he becomes arguably the most decorated safety in Notre Dame history. And I think Ayden Pouncey has some of that, not quite as much as Dallas, but a lot, where this kid can help you on both sides of the ball and at multiple positions in your defense. And that's the last big part of the class impact when you look at him specifically. You ready to watch some film, Shaun?
Let's do it.
You're always ready to watch film. It's one of the things I love about you, man. We're always ready to talk some film. Shaun will text me like 12 o'clock at night, like, yo, I'm just watching this kid. I'm like, dude, it's 12 o'clock and you're watching film. I knew there's a reason I liked you. So let's watch a little bit of Ayden Pouncey, y'all. You're gonna see him. First clip of the game, Shaun. First clip you see, and you see this on his some of this game film too, is he's a hitter. He's gonna have to get stronger, but he's a hitter. And look at the ground he covers. There's so much I like. The fact that he reads it this quickly, like watch, the quarterback is not even released the ball yet, and he's flying downhill. Number one. Now you got to be a little careful because a little pump fake it might get you, but he flies downhill. Look how quickly he gets to full speed. That's important for me because a lot of guys that are tall, Shaun, they need time to build up speed. You see him fly downhill and just lay this kid out. There's some strength there, and you see it as a return man too, Shaun, where this kid, even though he's 6'3", 375 pounds, he's a little bit skinny, he's strong for his size, and it's only going to get stronger as he fills out and spends some time in a college weight room. Like, look at that leg drive right there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is not your typical tall, skinny kid that, I'm just going to go out of bounds. Nope, I'm not going out of bounds. Y'all better keep coming at me. It's a big time. And I love that. I know my dad would hate that, but I'd tell him not to do it, but I kind of love that. Blowing a kiss to the sideline. He got flagged for it. That's why I don't love it, but I love it. You know what I mean?
And I think when you watch his film, you can let me make sure I say this within context. You talk about his times. Well, time was an issue for someone we know to be a first-team All-Pro in the National Football League by the name of Kyle Hamilton. The time was his issue coming out of college, right? But he covered ground as fast as anyone when you watch the film. So you talk about his length and the time, but what is the football speed? How much ground is he covering? Whether he has his hands in the ball or, and this is something else that I think Mike Mickens does an incredible job that you see from watching his film offensively. Long speed right there. And that long speed, there you go. Not as explosive possibly as a Bubba Frazier.
Right. His first step's not going to be like a 5'9", 5'10" guy.
No. But my point is, I love Mike Mickens because Ayden Pouncey is a very instinctive football player. And when you have great instincts, that makes up for what the clock might say. You play faster than what that stopwatch is saying because you have instincts, you have
Look at that. Love that cutting
anticipation.
ability, Shaun. Look at that athleticism just to be able to jump cut like that. That
Because
back cut right there.
he's an instinctive player.
Right. But
With the ball,
I don't care how instinctive I was in high school. I was a pretty good athlete in high school. I'm not making that move. It's not just instincts, but it's also you got to have the athleticism to do what you're.
I was about to give you a little bit of credit, bro.
I mean, I was athletic, but I wasn't doing that. I told you before, man. Like I thought I was really hot stuff until I went and saw Ronald Curry play, and I realized I'm real mid at this point in time right now. You know what I mean? But let me say something too about the time. People talking about he ran 11:05. That 11:05 that everybody talks about, that's from a year ago. So he's, his time is going to obviously be better than that now. But again, at some point in time, guys, you got to stop obsessing over speed on the track that are you don't see context. Anyone can type in athletic.net or whatever and see a time. That doesn't mean that that's all the times they have. This gets reported, and you got to look at when those things were done. This kid's playing in Orlando and he has no problems with speed. And look at that. I mean, you can only see the get off, but look at the get off though. Look how quick he is off the line. And that's the thing that you say, what makes you think that a kid that tall can play cornerback? It's the movement. He's an easy mover, right? So like, and the other thing too is even if he is only a 4.6, and let's just say for argument's sake, he's only a 4.6. What some of y'all have to understand is you've got to look at a 40 time differently for a guy like him than you do, just like we did for Cam Hart, than a guy who is 5'11". Because that 5'11" guy needs the speed to be in position.
Mm-hmm.
Guys like this who's 6'3", and I mean, you're talking about he's got about at least a 5 or 6 inch advantage over a 6 foot cornerback when it comes to his length, not just height, but just also the length because he's very long. And that's like, think about in a 40-yard dash, 5 or 6 inches is, like half of a tenth of, I mean, that's like a 4.5 to a 4.55. That's it. That's only 5, 6 inches that's it. In a 40-yard dash. So that's the other thing too, is that so that way in Cam Hart, did anybody ever question that Cam Hart had the speed to play in college? No, they didn't but he ran a 4.5 flat. It's far from being a burner. But when you're that long and you're instinctive, which I think I think Shaun, you're correct in that assessment, that's going to help you cover a lot of ground. But look how is he as explosive as Bubba Frazier? No, but for a 6'3" kid, look how quickly he gets downhill.
Change the direction.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's important. It's very important. Make that guard miss and get to the football. He's a very instinctive young man. I like the patience there. He knows he has help inside. He doesn't overplay it. Because this is football smarts. Because if he drives down, some guys just follow the ball. If he drives inside, that guy cuts outside of him. Yeah. He knows where his help is. So he stays outside. And then you see him help make the tackle. The one thing I do like is we do get to see him play some press man, which is good to see. You see that right there. Look at that length. I mean, he's all over that kid. Just no chance on that play, Shaun. No chance.
I actually like him in off man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because of his instincts.
Kind of why I like the field for him, the field position a little bit for him, because he can, like you said, he can stay off. He can kind of read things. He can get up underneath things. He can drive downhill. He can cover a lot of ground. Yeah. I mean, I think he can play both. And honestly, I'm not sure what Notre Dame prefers him as, whether they prefer him as a fielder or boundary. I don't know. So when I say this, I'm giving you my opinion, not Notre Dame's. That's why I'm with you, Shaun. I really like him in that field spot is because of the combination of instincts and range, and he can tackle. You got to be able to tackle to play that field spot. And he does a real nice job of that.
That's going to be interesting. Like I said, one of the things you think about is the instincts that he plays with. It's going to be interesting. I think once he gets on campus, how he reacts to what he's seeing. Mm-hmm. Right? Because it's always a transition. You hear when you talk to the freshmen after their first spring, after their first off season, you start to talk to them about what they really had to go through and learn about themselves, not just learning the playbook, not just learning what they're being asked to do. Like who am I now? Because I'm no longer the best dude on the field every time I step on the field. Now, who am I? Who am I going to become, and what's going to be best for me? And then how they get into that and how they decide by their play where they're going to be allocated or possibly reallocated in the defense or in the position room. That's why I'm excited about a kid like this that has so many different areas that he could possibly go to. Like, what is he going, his work, what is that going to determine for the coaching staff and himself once he gets to Notre Dame? I'm excited to see how that,
and real quick,
lays out.
Right here, you see some of the areas where he still needs to improve. His footwork, he's just kind of athletic right now. Like, his footwork needs a lot of work. You can see here, he's already leaning outside. He's already flipping his hips outside, thinking the guy's going to go outside, as opposed to just, stay in your pedal, stay square until he declares. He bites outside really early. So he should be beat here. But he's able to look how quickly he goes from leaning outside with his hips to turning inside and closing on this ball. That's an impressive athletic play. Now, that's not a good technical play. And honestly, like, if Noah Grubbs is the quarterback here, that's a touchdown. But the thing that I like, Shaun, is, the result I don't care as much about for high school tape. I got to see, do you have the physical tools? There's a technical stuff that needs to get cleaned up there. But what you see is two things. Number one, athleticism. Number two, this is the length I'm talking about. A 6-foot guy here is toast. He has no chance to get his hands on a football. He breaks that pass up, Shaun. Bad pedal, leans outside, doesn't close the way you'd think you need to close, and yet he's still able to get his hands on the football, on a ball that's in front of the receiver, because he's so long. And that's what I say, you got to reassess speed for a guy like this, because most 6'3" guys like this are not, like, super explosive. They're more fluid, they're more smooth. A lot of the more explosive, twitchier guys are playing wide receiver because they're vertically fast, but they don't have the hips and the feet and things like that to play cornerback. And that's why those guys are a receiver. But he's a smooth athlete, Shaun. He's very smooth. He's not tight. Like, Cam had a little bit of hip tightness. I don't see that with this young man. I see more Leonard more in that regard than I see Cam Hart. And his film reminds me a lot of Leonard's too, because you really see his speed in the return game. That's when you really see his speed kind of really take off. Is like, you want to know what kind of speed this kid has, go watch him in the return game, and you're going to see, what kind of high end speed that he has. And we talked about that when we were breaking down Leonard Moore. Like, guys, this kid's faster than you think he is. Look at that. Because that was the question with Leonard, is like, he had an old 100-meter dash time that was like 12. I was like, can he run? I'm like, you want to know if he can run? Watch this clip right here. Watch him right here on offense or on special teams, and then you get a chance to see it. So that's what we like about him. Well, Shaun, let's dive into the what's next, because we got a lot we got to get to today. What's next at Notre Dame at cornerback? Obviously, there's several guys on the board. To the two main ones is Kerry Adams, and then, of course, Jazeel Hart. I think Kerry Adams is still a big-time target for Notre Dame. He's a top 50 overall type recruit, elite speed, 6'1", very talented player on both sides of the ball. He's one of those kids, Shaun, that Notre Dame would take no matter what. He's a guy that can do a lot of different things. I think he also can play all three cornerback spots in Notre Dame defense. He's not a guy that I would completely rule out being a safety. Because of his skill set. I love him as a nickel. I mean, he's another guy that can play everywhere, but the reality is the one thing that Kerry Adams has, is it Kari or Kerry? I want to make sure I'm saying, is it Kari?
I've heard it both ways.
Okay.
I've literally heard it both ways. Yeah.
Let's go Kari. The one thing he has is, compared to maybe some of the others, is he has true burner speed. And that's one of the reasons that I think Notre Dame views him as a must-get type of guy at the cornerback position. They like Jazeel Hart as well, as we've talked about. He's smart. He's instinctive. He's a lot of those things. And then, of course, people ask, well, what does this mean for Joey O'Brien? Nothing. Doesn't mean anything for Joey O'Brien, because Joey O'Brien is one of those guys that if Notre Dame had 6 DBs committed and Joey O'Brien wanted to come, Notre Dame's going to say, we'll take you, because he's one of those you never – there's always 4 or 5 guys like that in the class. and he's that for the defense. It's like it doesn't matter who's committed. If Joey O'Brien wants to wait until December to decide and he picks Notre Dame, they're taking him no matter what. Now, what it does kind of have an impact on a little bit is the position, but I don't think that is necessarily – I don't think it impacts it. If Joey O'Brien wants to play corner, they're going to give him a chance to play corner. I've never – from my understanding from different people I've talked to, and I've never talked to Joey, so just keep that in mind. But my understanding from talking to people close to him or people that know him, he doesn't really care as much about corner versus safety. He just wants to get on the field, and he just wants to play. I also think the success he had this spring playing safety in the 7-on-7s has him more comfortable with the idea that he may be a Kyle Hamilton type of safety. But he also is a guy that wants to potentially play some receiver. Now, Penn State's now pushing that with him because they know that they're trailing Notre Dame, so they're pulling out all the stops.
And they don't have any wide receivers.
That's right.
I'm just
no, that's all right. Mike Mickens is actually out in Pennsylvania today. He plans on stopping by LaSalle to check in on Joey O'Brien. So if you're on the message board, you'd have seen that post I put out of where they're going today. So he's out to see Joey O'Brien. It's not a coincidence that the first guy that Mike Mickens is going to see when this period opens back up is Joey O'Brien. That just tells you he might be the number one defensive player on the board regardless, but he is far, but because of his versatility, but he certainly, like I said, him and Kari Adams are take no matter what kind of guys, you know what I mean? And Joey's even more versatile than Ayden, in my opinion. So he's that kind of guy as far as the corner. Obviously, Notre Dame's still recruiting Nick Reddish. There's a couple other guys on the board. I don't think Notre Dame is going to force the issue with numbers in this DB class. They'll take guys if they can get them, but if they miss out on some guys, I don't see them right now like feeling the need to panic and go get somebody. So, Zach Fort recently announced he's kind of shutting down his recruitment. I don't think that they necessarily feel the need to, we got to go replace him with somebody because the numbers are so good on the current depth chart of young players that, if you think about the depth chart, you got Christian Gray, who's a junior, and Chance Tucker, who's going to be a senior this year, fifth-year senior. After that, literally everyone else in the depth chart is a true sophomore or true freshman. So school-wise, because obviously Carson Hobbs he's a redshirt freshman, but he's sophomore in school. Very young depth chart. Same thing as safety. You've got Luke Talich, who's a junior. You've got a Don Schuler, who's a junior. Jalen Stroma, but then everybody else is freshman or sophomore. Bronte's a sophomore. Tabron Benny Powell's a sophomore. Trying to think. Obviously, you got your freshman class, Jadon Blair. You've got Ethan Long, Brandon Logan. So you've got a very young secondary. So I don't feel that Notre Dame feels the need that they have to load up on numbers in this class. Now, they will load up if it's dudes. So, like, if they take 6 guys in this class, it's because the bunch of dudes wanted to still come, and they're just not going to say no to them. But there's not the same need as you need. But I do think they needed one more deep corner class. I actually do think that corner numbers are still a bit of a need because there's no guarantee that Christian Gray will still be on the team when these kids show up as freshmen. If Christian has a monster year this year, maybe he goes pro. But there's a really good chance that this corner class is going to only spend 1 year on a roster with Christian Gray and Leonard Moore. And that's 2026. Most likely they're both gone. And then after that, yes, you love Dallas Golden, Mark Zachary, and Cree Thomas, and Carson Hobbs, but none of them have proven anything yet. So you got to keep out there, keep going out and recruiting. So, and then, of course, you're also working with more than 85 scholarships now. So you don't have to be as numbers conscious as maybe you were in the past. So that's a little bit on the what's next, Shaun. But I did want to speak to the Joey O'Brien thing because I think a lot of people see Ayden Pouncey and think, well, he's just like Joey O'Brien. So does this hurt Joey O'Brien? But the final piece too, Shaun, and this is what you said earlier, and I want to kick this over to you. Football is still very much a sport where other dudes want to play with other dudes, where dudes want to play with other dudes. So when you see certain big-time players committing and, pay attention to some of the stuff you see from other recruits in the 26 and 27 class because they're like, what? Notre Dame got him? I didn't even know that Notre Dame was, like, even a major contender for that kid. And you start to see it. You see Javion Osborne multiple times to some of the recent commitments. Like, really? Like, okay. And so I think those are things that you look at and start paying attention a little bit to that, Shaun, because it speaks volumes. Because usually when big time players commit somewhere or talented players commit somewhere, you get certain reactions from players because they're like, okay, Notre Dame is doing something. And that's why certain teams fill up in their top 2 or 3 every year, because other players see that and they're like, hey, I want to be part of what they're building right now.
Everything means something. Like everything that happens means something, even if it doesn't lead to a young man ultimately choosing Notre Dame. And so you pointed out Zach Ford. You want to know how well things are going in recruiting for the defensive backfield? A committed player from Georgia chose on his own dime to make a visit during the spring to Notre Dame. Even though he shut it down and said, I'm still remaining with Georgia, that says something. Mm. That says something in the eyes of the elite. Notre Dame is worth a look. Like, okay, I need to pay attention to what's going on. I like them, but they didn't have certain things at the time. Now they have those things. Now they have more of my attention. Let me go see whether or not this is worthwhile, whether or not it's worth me decommitting and possibly giving a deeper look and taking an official visit. All of those things, it didn't end up in Notre Dame flipping the kid or getting him to decommit, but it's putting everyone on notice like, hey, kids are now thinking a lot more about Notre Dame nationally and within the top 100 than they were previously. It's the same way where we would say, man, they couldn't even get their kid on campus. That's saying something about where Notre Dame still is from a recruiting standpoint, because you have to be able to at least get those kids on campus for you to start feeling like you're starting to eat up ground or eating up what's left over as gap closers in recruiting. And so you're starting to see that distance being eaten up because you're seeing guys like a Zach Ford that doesn't end up in Notre Dame, but he makes that visit. That means something. You're starting to see other top recruits very quietly come in to take a visit, and then people find out about it, and it's like, oh, they
didn't even know he was coming.
I didn't even know he was coming. Yeah. Those are the type of stories that we feel like you're going to hear more. They're going to become more normal because Notre Dame is starting to close the gap from a recruiting standpoint. And of course, it's correlated to what we said for the last 2 years. If Notre Dame can win, they haven't won the national championship, but if they can win, you're going to start to see the effort and the work that the staff has been putting in. Now you're going to see it come to fruition because it's going to start to line up, right? And now they're going to close the mouths of the ops, per se, the people that negative recruit Notre Dame that say and tell these players from Florida, from the South, why would you go up there? You're not going to get drafted. They can't develop you. They can't get you into the first and second round. You're not going to be in a national championship game. Where now all of those excuses are, it's almost like B Rabbit, right? In the movie Eminem. Like, I've said everything myself. Now now tell everybody else something they don't know.
Yeah, I know everything you're about to say about me, right? Yeah. Now you're left with what? It's cold there.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. That's the weather sucks. Now you're back to that, and that's all you got left. And Notre Dame's Lou Holtz always used this when I was told that his staff would always talk about, well, you're going to tell the Packers or Bears or, whoever that you're not going to play for them if they draft you because it's cold. You know what I mean? But when you're left, that's all you got left now. Yeah, but it's cold there. You got to really work hard in the classroom. Okay. Well, you weren't going to get that kid anyway if that's something that he knew. And if he didn't know, he probably wasn't going to end up at Notre Dame anyway, if you didn't know that. So, Shaun, that's going to do it for our Ayden Pouncey breakdown. Big commitment for Notre Dame. It's a big one, literally and figuratively. Notre Dame able to dip into Florida for another commitment. You're seeing a strategy where Notre Dame is putting a lot of emphasis on a few key states. Obviously, Texas being one, North Carolina being one, Georgia being one, and then, of course, Florida. And Florida's been interesting for Notre Dame in the past, Shaun, because they either do they've said, okay, we're going to recruit that state, and then they've gotten a lot of kids over the years that maybe really didn't fit at Notre Dame. It was always a struggle to kind of keep them where they needed to be and going to class and doing things the right way. And then they just would stop recruiting state altogether because of those issues. And I think what this staff has done is like, look, we have to be able to recruit state of Florida. We just have to make sure we find the young men that fit here and understand that. And so that you see that with Dallas Golden. That's a different type of young man. You see that with Ayden Pouncey. That's a different type of young man. You see that with the people, their support system at home is a lot different than maybe what we have seen in the past. And I think those things matter where this staff understands we can't ignore Florida just because maybe it's a little harder for us to get kids and keep kids from that state. We just got to be smart about it and understand sometimes we're going to lose those kids. We're going to have the Keon Keeley's flip every now and then. This is part of recruiting with the big boys. But when you find kids that really get this place, like Dallas Golden, like Noah Grubbs, like Ayden Pouncey, I don't want to say Dylan Faison because that's a little bit different, because you've got the family connection and all that. He obviously gets Notre Dame. And then there's the lacrosse aspect of it. He's a 5-star lacrosse player. Notre Dame's the back-to-back national champions in lacrosse. A little different deal with him. But just the pure football guys, it's finding those right fits and then getting them. And so you're seeing more emphasis in Texas. You're seeing more emphasis in North Carolina where they have, I think, 3 commitments from that state right now. You're seeing more emphasis in Florida where they now have 3 commits from. And they're hoping to land multiple kids from Texas left. They've obviously want Caden Finley. They want Braden Robinson on offense. They obviously want to be able to get Tiki Hola on defense. And you're seeing guys from Georgia, and you're seeing more North Carolina. I mean, there's still more North Carolina guys on the board. Xavion Griffith-Haynes on the D-line. You're seeing, obviously, Nick Reddish at safety. And we've talked about Noah Clark at defensive tackle. So there's still guys on the board. You talk about California with Kerry Wilder. They're still trying to get him. You look at the state of Florida. There's still guys on the board in the state of Florida that they're trying to get. So, and then you look at the NFL draft this past weekend. And you see how every year those states just load up with kids being drafted from those states. And Notre Dame is making a play to be more involved and smartly involved in those states. But when you make a concerted effort on Texas, and then you just say, well, we're just not going to recruit Florida and California, you're missing out. Be selective and smart in those states, but you still got to recruit them and find the kids that fit you. If you ignore California, knowing you're not going to get many kids from there, then you miss out on Kingston, Viliama Asa, and Madden Faremo. If you just recruit Florida, you just ignore Florida because it's tough, then you miss out on the Dallas Goldens. You miss out on the Ayden Pounceys. You miss out on the Noah Grubbses. And the same thing is true in Texas. If you just say, hey, well, it's hard to beat Texas for kids and all, then you miss out on the Jaden Greathouses and Leonard Moores and Kedron Youngs and Jadarian Prices and all Javion Osborns and guys like that who they're trying to get. Tiki Holas who they're trying to get. So you got to be smart. Make sure you find the right kids that fit Notre Dame. And we've said this all along, Shaun. There's more kids than you realize that are Notre Dame fits. You just got to give them a reason to come. And that's why you're seeing the successes, because the on-field product is starting to be more attractive to these young men. The off-the-field stuff's always been there. But now the on-field product's getting there. And that's having huge impact. So just wanted to leave that little tidbit before we move on, folks. Before we get to that next section, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. We would greatly appreciate that. If you're listening via podcast platform, give us a 5-star review. But of course, as always, Shaun, if you want the intel, you want to know what's going on, make sure you sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com.